Good evening, everybody. It's great to be in Cork. Before I start, unfortunately, I have to read because Alzheimer's has robbed me of the ability to speak off the top of my head. Now, I'm sure the Alzheimer's Society staff will be delighted that I have to read and keep to notes. And for that, I want to thank them profusely. The Alzheimer's Society of Ireland and the Irish Dementia Working Group for the support they've given me over the last 4.5 years. I can assure you at times I nearly drove them mad. I would also, of course, like to remember my colleagues in Europe, the Alzheimer's Europe and the European Working Group. And it's great to be in Cork because I got to catch up with my in-laws, so I want to thank Gus and Carol for coming from Clonakilty. So thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this evening about the impact of early onset Alzheimer's diagnosis on my life, my work in advocacy and human rights, and how every community around Ireland can be inclusive towards people with dementia. I will briefly tell you about my life. Me as a person, I lived abroad for many years. I had a wonderful career in the corporate sector. Together with Sean, my husband, who's here with me this evening, and our son Martin, we returned to live in Sligo, where we ran a business in the tourism sector for a number of years. And then, unfortunately, Sean got a chronic illness. We sold it, but at 51, I returned to university to study community development. And I found my wonderful retirement job in the disability sector. I was a very active citizen, serving on many boards and a promoter of human rights. I was former president of the Chamber of Commerce, a founder member of Western Track, which is a community campaign for proper infrastructure for the Western region. I was a member of many disability committees, and I was also on the Housing Committee for Sligo County Council, and I was chair of the Western Development Commission. And there are not too many women in this country that are on state boards, I can tell you. I'm also a peace commissioner. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I have 9 siblings. This was my life before the revocability of dementia diagnosis crept in. So this evening I stand here because I have always been passionate about human rights. So interestingly, a lot of my work in community development, the disability sector, had been about human rights and advocating for the rights of others. And today, I'm advocating for my own rights. When I was first diagnosed, I did not think about what my rights were, and yet I was facing many human rights challenges. I suppose before I could even begin to find the courage to think about my rights, I had to find the courage to accept and to learn to live with my dementia diagnosis. And believe me, that takes a hell of a lot of courage. Some days I stay busy and focused, and there are days that I can just about manage to push my condition and my unravelling behind a locked door in my mind. But then there are days like today when I have to remember it, have to face it, and have to speak out about this illness for myself and my family. I have to keep speaking out for the many people living with dementia, not just here in Ireland, but across Europe. Your loved ones, your friends, your family, and maybe you. The majority of us living with dementia are living among you in your communities, and we are fighting hard to stay among you and live as well as we can, but we need support. My story is shared by 11 million people across Europe who today is living with dementia. Each story is unique, and each story will have different highs and lows, but each will also share a common thread. We are people first. We are not a condition, and we deserve to be acknowledged like everybody else. In the mid-50s, I started to experience memory problems, and I was finally diagnosed at the age of 62. In fact, I had 2 diagnoses, that I had Alzheimer's at 57, but sometimes it takes it's a little more difficult to, as I have since learned, to fully diagnose early onset Alzheimer's. I was busy working and planning my retirement, and I was doing a mediation course, and I was hoping that when I retired, that is what I was going to give my life back to the community in doing family mediation. So when I was diagnosed, it was like a slow realization that a creeping fog had descended on your life, and it was there for the good. My day-to-day tasks became challenging. I was forgetting words. I was stopping mid-sentence, wondering what I was about to say. searching, covering up, forgetting again. Simple tasks that I've been doing all my life became a chore and a worry. Slow thinking was difficult and impacted me in many ways, such as trying to remember something I had read or newly learned, seeing words but unable to reach them, forgetting events at recent meetings, forgetting what people had asked me to do. I can still see the look on people's faces, sitting in that boardroom, and the words wouldn't come out. There was silence, and the words failed. I was confused, and I found it hard to motivate myself to complete tasks. Tasks that once only came a mere few minutes were taking hours. But I put it down to taking on too much and just needing a break. I can assure you my family members reminded me of all I was doing and that maybe if I gave a little more time to myself, that everything would be okay. Our family life became more difficult. I would chat to Martin, my son, on the phone, and I'd forget what he had told me. Or Sean would ask me or remind me to do something, and I had forgotten. Now, I can assure you, when my son rang, he was probably saying, "Mum, put a few quid in the bank." He's a student. But those things became difficult for them, and they noticed that I was just forgetting things. So prior to my diagnosis, I struggled at work. I was still hoping that the mental sluggishness was due to stress and overexertion. It took so much effort just to keep up, to maintain the guise of normality. And when the opportunity to take early retirement came, I felt I had no choice to take it, because I had slowly drifted from the vital, funny, energetic woman I used to be and inhabited only the shadows. I withdrew from public activities. At home with no focus on myself, the DMC's illness, my energy was zapped. I lost all motivation, and the deepest darkness, sadness descended on my life. I was flooded with lots of different emotions: frustration, loneliness, depression, and anger about life's changes, and that dread for isolation, missing your work colleagues, missing all the people that you were with and committees. There was no way I can describe the shock the day that I received my diagnosis and the long, lonely drive home from Galway to Sligo, wondering how I was going to tell Sean and Martin. There was, however, also a degree of relief in getting a diagnosis, as I really thought I was losing my mind. I don't remember the conversation with my family, but I do remember the pain. So I want you to ask yourself this question: how do you tell your loved ones that in an undisclosed amount of time, you will not be able to recognise them nor retain all the wonderful memories that you've banked along the way? And that is how I felt on my drive home. I remember lying awake, staring into the blackness, wondering where I was going to go from here. I tried to come to terms with the diagnosis, but there was yet another blow to come. More bad news. The threshold age for early onset Alzheimer's support in Ireland is 65. There is nothing, and I mean nothing at all. There were no support services, nowhere to go, no one to give you advice or tips on how to proceed. For me, having spent my entire life campaigning for human rights, this was inconceivable. I couldn't believe that just because of a random number, I would be ignored, worse still, refused all help and services. But I didn't have the strength or the will to fight it. I retreated. I felt helpless for the first time in my life. No plan, no ideas, no strategies. Those first few months were spent grappling with heartache. And although I still felt my career in voluntary work defined who I was and how I was thought of in the community, I was too ashamed to mention my illness to anyone. I was more than aware of the stigma associated with it. I was nuts, I was mentally ill, I was bonkers, and all of those other things. I felt there was no one to turn to except the internet. And believe me, Dr. Google is not who you should be looking at. I wish somebody was there to hold my hand and explain to me Alzheimer's is not just about a memory, it impacts on our ability to accomplish daily tasks. I would have loved somebody to be there to give advice on how to tell my family and that there were supports for them. The right to information is fundamental to participation in society as a person with dementia. The problems our families and carers face are immense. The pain of watching their loved one change, the relationship dynamic change, the pain anxiety brings to our children and loved ones. Eventually, I got the courage and started telling people I had the illness. I visited the Western Alzheimer's, and the nurse advised me to get involved in research and tell people I had Alzheimer's. Eventually, I found some research through Trinity College, which led me to that wonderful day to the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland and the newly formed Irish Dementia Working Group. Until I reached out and got help, I could only see darkness. But somehow, after I told people, I could see some light. Thankfully, I was able to participate in cognitive rehabilitation therapy through Trinity College and the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland. And this gave me some valuable tools and strategies. By now, I had stopped using a diary. I spent my life in a diary. I had stopped using the phone, the computer, the iPad, and all of a sudden, I was now having to be retrained and start to use some new tools. The illness hasn't gone away. I've just learned to handle it better. It doesn't define me. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have left the house. Now I'm travelling with assistance, driving, having passed my test 2 weeks ago again, and living life with support from family and the friends and the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland and our working group. I'm travelling all over Europe, speaking about dementia and campaigning for rights and engaging in major research that I hope someday will find a cure. There is no cure for me. All I have is hope. Medicines in some cases may stop progression, but they are not for all of us, and they have many side effects that are horrendous. Acceptance of my diagnosis has allowed me to go one step further and start to look for a quality of life as a person with dementia, a mother, a wife, a sister, a community activist, and a citizen. Thankfully, the Irish Dementia Working Group support me to get involved in advocacy and policy work, but we often face barriers in fulfilling our rights. We need to get a timely diagnosis. We need person-centred quality care and the right to be respected as individuals in our communities. The biggest challenges we face still in society is stigma. We have to eliminate it. And the one way we can do it is by involving people with dementia in decision-making and strategy. We need to have a culture where people with dementia have a voice, where they're included in driving forward action on dementia. I cannot stress enough how important it is to have people with dementia involved in decision-making. And I don't mean tokenistic. We often find at the last minute invitations to participate because we have experiential knowledge and wisdom. So here we see how participation, empowerment and accountability all interconnect to combat stigma. As Amanda sang earlier, I'm still the same Helen. I'm still the same Helen before the illness and after the illness. So it's important that people remember that. People with dementia, we're finally learning to speak out, to speak up and have our voices heard. And it is empowering and encouraging. When we speak, we also speak for those who cannot stand here, for those who cannot be part of today, but whose human rights matter as much as ours. Not every person living with dementia can become a public advocate because it is a difficult task. It takes almost total dedication and shedding lots of tears along the way. Advocates see the death and misery that dementia causes, but we put our emotions to one side and we tell our stories because the rewards are huge, not just for us, but for the millions of people living with dementia around the world. As advocates, we hope to create a better quality of life that someday we will all benefit from. It is also important that we change how communities view dementia. We need leaders in our communities to stand up and set examples to others. I suppose for me, one person I remembered when I wanted to become an advocate was Eunice Kennedy. And Eunice Kennedy saw the difficulties with intellectual disability, and she took action. Special Olympics today have 4.5 million athletes in 170 countries. So I'm asking you this evening, could you be a Eunice? Because we need innovative ideas and alternative solutions to stay involved in our communities. People with dementia, we want to stay in our homes. But I think all of you, as leaders in your communities, can help us by increased education and awareness of the illness. We need to equip the newly diagnosed member of the community with tools to continue staying active in their local area, which can improve their health and well-being. And you can also learn about people's legal rights, your neighbours, your friends, your work colleagues, and all of those that live around you that have the illness. The problems we still face are stigma, which is ingrained into our society. But I'm sure with your help and resourcefulness, we can push our mission forward and create a major impact. So this evening I'm asking you to please risk your time and effort to achieve significant change in how dementia is viewed in Ireland. I know that together we can do it. And as Mahatma Gandhi once said, you must be the change you want to see in the world. You can be that change. And I know, ladies and gentlemen, you can be that change.